Okay, welcome. So I'm just doing a Q&A of the split. We've all finished. So if you have any questions that you want to ask about how the split went, how the finals were, all those kind of things, do put them in the chat. Couldn't work out a way to get both YouTube and Twitch on the stream, so I can see both, and I'll just have to say this is a question from YouTube or something like that, because you guys still only see the Twitch chat. Also, apologies for the delay. We had a meeting that was supposed to be short, but ended up going about twice as long, which unfortunately happens. And I still need to get this done as soon as possible because I plan to go out after this with my wife. So, okay, how do you think the new changes will impact the meta in the future? I think there, as always, with these big changes, there's going to be more difference later than there is now. So when those changes first come in, sorry, wait, let me just see something. Okay, wait, so you do see both the chats? Because that says it's on YouTube, but okay, I'm confused. But anyway, so sorry, we'll get back to it again. So, Haida, for me, when a change happens, the first thing that people do is they just play the same meta as before. And then after that, they try and find something new. So right now, what we're seeing at first stand is basically the exact same meta as it was before. I find it hard to believe that that's going to be the case going forward. So the really big things that you'll expect to see is more carries in top lane, because the downside is that anytime you pick a carry, you have to worry about, okay, but what if they lane swap? So there's always that's always going to be a consideration. And the other thing that I think you'll probably see more is going back to more prio in bot lane, because again, the like double ranged that we used to see a lot, obviously that's been nerfed, but the reason that was so strong is that you just take over the lane like level 1, 2, and 3. And the reason that wasn't picked for a while, again, the champions were nerfed, yes, but it was also because you could always swap away. So the swaps were used to punish carry tops, and they were used to avoid really heavy, oppressive bot lane matchups. So both those things, I think, could well come into the future. We're just actually having a conversation about NLC for the future, and against a team like Lost Returns, for example, I think the fact that there's no lane swaps is a really good thing, because not only were they good at lane swaps, it also frees up a lot of Bowser's champions, because you can't play the counters because you just swap on the counters. If you pick Sion early on, now that you can't lane swap, okay, Sion maybe is a bit different because you can try that dive. I don't know actually that Sion dive. That might also not be possible too. What wave do you need to be in bot lane before you can have multiple people there? Maybe if it's just mid and top, then actually the Sion one can still work, which is quite interesting. Like not the lane swap, but you just dive the bot lane. So that could be quite fun. But the other thing is that champions like Trundle, champions like Gwen, always you would have to have in the back of your mind, okay, right, they're strong, but they'll be lane swapped on. So it's going to take them a lot longer to get to that stage where they're really, really strong. So those are the things for me that are important. One question that I got asked a little while ago, or on the last stream, which I'm going to answer now, is I've mentioned a few times that I wasn't really happy with my own performance over the finals weekend. And I want to give that a little bit more context, talk a little bit more about what I did and what I would have liked to do and what I would do differently in the future. So I'm not someone who particularly, I think, gets massively impacted by pressure, at least in an obvious way. It's not so I don't, get super nervous. I don't pace back and forward loads behind the scenes. If anything, the criticism is always that it seems like I don't care rather than I get too nervous or anything like that. But one thing that did happen is that I just fell back into the bad habits that I had before. And what I mean by that is that last time I was coaching, and how a lot of coaches actually are, to be quite honest, is a bit kind of just like passengers, and just stuff is happening around us and we're not being like intentional and purposeful with how we're impacting what's going on around us. And that was what I fell back into. So there's loads of excuses for this, of course. I wasn't there at the media day, so I arrived at like 11:30, having had a really, really long travel, 11:30 at night. I woke up at 6 to start the day, and then I was straight into the first game. But all of that's really just an excuse. What I didn't do and what I should have done is take some time to think, okay, how do I want this weekend to go? What are the things that I could impact, and how am I going to impact those things? So, for example, what actually should have been the process after every game? And now I would, if you ask me that question now, I can obviously say, well, we should make sure we go outside, we get some fresh air, we're standing. I'll make sure I check up with each of the players, how they felt about the game. And then we move on to draft. And then we lastly move on to new things for the next game. But because I felt like I was kind of doing everything, but most importantly, because I just didn't take the time to think what I would like, I ended up just kind of during the game doing draft for the next game, in between the games just talking about the draft with the team and kind of nothing else. And for me, that was really not good enough. So it was okay during the Bulldogs game, obviously easier games that we were winning, but I wasn't able to provide the support that might have made the difference in the Lost of Tones games. Now, I'm not saying like, if I'd have done better, we'd have won or anything like that, of course, but still just a big learning for me. I'd been getting better at that kind of stuff, obviously taking 2 years working with a bunch of coaches, but also working on myself, working on coaching theory, all those kind of things. All the like practices and the way we approach the draft and stuff is much more intentional than it has been in the past for me. But that, in-person situation just completely fell away from my point of view. And it's just taking that time to really kind of think through what you want. That was the only actually kind of pre-prepared thing that I wanted to say. So if you do have any other things, just let me know in the chat. So some kind of highlight video, I've seen the reactions of the NORD players versus the reactions of the LR players in pauses, being very frustrated. Why do you think that is? The one that I saw at least was completely cherry-picked. So that's why that was. I think the montage that someone sent me was them pausing before the start of the game and us in a pause in the middle of the game. So of course it looks like one is way different. When you watch their streams during the pauses in the game, everyone's kind of a little bit stressed because it's all a bit of a weird situation. During the pauses before the game, Tamas and Vizicachi and Santorin were playing a Yone 1v1 where you were auto-refreshing cooldowns and health and stuff like that, and just laughing so much they were almost falling off their chairs. So if you compare that to like when Bowser's getting a massage or whatever was the clip. So I think in general, and I spoke about this before, one of the things that we wanted to try was a bit of a kind of cheese strat to throw people off the game. And the thing that I told the team, which I really stand by, is one of Lost of Tone's biggest problems is that they're so unaccustomed to losing and they shut down very, very quickly. And so if you throw them off their game, they recover much slower. And I still think to this day that we're much better at that. The pause, of course, is frustrating for everybody. And when you're on the receiving end of the worst situation, like if we didn't pause, we almost definitely get a kill there. For the second game, for example, it's naturally going to be more frustrating. But at least the clips that I saw were just quite funnily cherry-picked. Like it was the pause before the game compared to the pause during a game. And so obviously you're more stressed during a game. Do you think there's any way for a coach to prepare for LAN event games, or do you just need to go there and experience it to know for next time? I think absolutely there is ways to prepare. Experience does really help, but experience without doing anything doesn't help. So if I don't change how I am next time, if I don't think through what do I actually want, how do I actually want things to go, what do I actually want to achieve, if I don't think all that stuff through, I'll just do the same thing next time. So I'm not learning from my mistakes. So it's not enough to just say, right, you win or you learn. You have to go through like, what are the processes that happened when I failed? You can do this for when you win as well, of course. And what do I want to change? So actually, we're going to do this for the whole split, which is something that esports teams really don't do. I don't think any esports team that I've been on has actually ever done this, which is wild to me. But just to go through and think, what did we do throughout the split that helped? What did we do throughout the split that hurt? And so next time, can we put in some processes so the stuff that helped happens more and the stuff that hurt happens less? It's quite simple, really, really simple exercise, but you have to actually do it. And the same thing applies when you're going to LAN. So what I needed to do is I needed to just sit down and think, what do I want to happen during this weekend and how am I going to make it happen? But I didn't do that. And to be honest, I've been working for the last few years as supporting coaches in the scene. And a big part of it is that kind of thing. It's like, this is not difficult questions, guys. You just need to actually do it. You just need to actually ask. So for me, that's a really big one. So you do need to go there and experience it. I think I needed to just get there early. Of course, this time was a bit of a different situation. Definitely don't regret staying here for half a day for my wife's birthday. But I should have had either someone there that I would trust to be as attentive to the performance details that we need to change, or I needed to just write it down really myself and get there a bit early and just go through a full plan and then go through the plan with the team. Because then at least, okay, maybe if I say, right, after every game, I'm going to come down to the stage. We're going to go out together outside. I'm going to talk with each of you as we're walking out about how you're feeling. Then we're going to talk about the draft. Then I'm going to give you one thing to look at for the next game. Let's say that was the process, which I literally just made up the first time I talked about this question. Then if it goes right or wrong, we can learn so much more by it being conscious. So that's going to be the big thing for me for next time. But like I said, something I should have been better at. But when you have 100 things going on in your head, it falls away quite easily. What's the biggest con to the streaming from your experience? I mean, from the competitive aspect, you lose a lot, obviously, by showing all your practice. Now, I'm a very big believer, especially in Fearless, that there is a place for professional teams streaming matches. I would say it's the first or second practice of the week, or especially the first or second practice of the 2 weeks, if you have these 2 week cycles of patches. But having it all streamed was quite a big disadvantage. So I spoke about this in my review, but in the first game, they had something prepared that they prepared off stream. And that already is just like, okay, this is such a big jump. Not that it necessarily was a massively impactful thing, but the fact to have done it is impactful, because now in between the game, throughout the next drafts, it's like, okay, if they pick Corky, it's definitely going bot. It's like, well, almost definitely, but not 100% definitely. Whereas when we pick stuff, like if we pick Swain, they know 100% it's going mid because all our practice is public. So that's a really big thing for me. If even like 80% of your practice is public, then you actually, I think, lose a big part of that con. But the biggest con was just showing all the practice. Now, of course, we have other cons in terms of our performance. I think it's a bigger deal, for example, that we're not full-time than that we were streaming. If we were streaming 5 games a day against good competition, then we would be much better than like playing 3 games or 3 days of practice versus not particularly good competition, 2 of which are streamed, So there is definite cons there. And yeah, that's I think the biggest one, but there might be others, but that's the only real one that's worth considering, I think. And I do think, like I say, that you can just balance it a bit differently. You just need to know as a team and be intentional as a team with, okay, this is a stream day, which means we're going to be quite light on like talking about specifics. We can try out some new things, but not if you're really serious about them. Other than that, we just play normally. Will next split be more full-time? No. We don't have the budget to be full-time, so we won't be. And also, as a team that wants to stream a lot of the stuff, it's not really sustainable to try and be streaming it all the time. Do you do sometimes team bonding activities with the team? If so, what worked best for you? Yeah, I do. I would want to do a huge amount of stuff with the team. I'm a massive believer in the importance of the team culture and laying out expectations, talking these kind of things through and working on all those other aspects rather than just the game, especially when you've got players of the level that we had this split. I think a big part is just how they come together as a team. When people say team bonding, what they often mean is like us doing fun stuff together, and that's fine. I think those can work well. And then in that case, the best is just the thing that you find the most fun. So classic ones are escape games. I know, for example, Vitality do this thing in Paris where they have like a immersive reality game where players get kidnapped and get abandoned on the streets of Paris and have to solve clues and find their way home. And that's awesome. very high budget. Obviously, you can't really do that if you're on an LEC team, but still a great idea. But for me, those are kind of secondary import. The thing that's more important is to do actual active work on the culture. So for that, I have a bunch of different exercises. There's a full episode on my YouTube channel of me and Watson doing our show called the Coach Support Show. And I think if I just quickly look, you can find an episode which is entitled like Team Culture or something like that. Let me go back and find it. Coach Support Show. Okay, I can't find it. One moment. It's not on the playlist, which means I probably didn't put it on the playlist properly, because I think it's episode 6 and that's the one that's not there. But anyway, there's an episode of the Coach Support Show which where we go into it in more detail. I think it might be the boot camps one, actually. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there's one called, let me do this. If I do it like this, here and here. So that's where you can get more details on the specific exercises that I like to do, but it's some sort of way of learning about your teammates, learning about yourself, learning about the organization, and planning for the future. And so for me, the best one, the one that's the most important, is learning about your teammates. So what we did this split, unfortunately, we didn't have time to do it with everybody, but this is something I definitely want to do in the future, is that we just had an interview with each person. It was an interview that I really wanted to not be streamed. It was about being private. It was about being open and honest and vulnerable. And the way you do that as a coach, the best way to do that is to just show it first. So of course I told them, I want you to feel comfortable to share as much as possible. Obviously I can't force anyone to share anything, but then the first person who was interviewed was me. So I got Victor, our CGO, to interview me, and I was just really open and honest about it. And it's stuff like, what's the biggest hardship of your life? What's something you've struggled with? It's those kind of things. So it's like a real proper, deep personal interview. And that for me is the best kind of, it's not team bonding, but it's the best culture exercise that you can do. The other one actually, which is what most teams do, if they do any of this stuff, is the planning for the future. So what kind of environment do we want to create? And let's go towards that. Let's aim towards that. But we unfortunately didn't have time to do that. So we had a long boot camp, but it was not very well run. And that was a really big learning, I think, for us for the future. Himkasa, are you going to stream every scrim? No, I think not, actually. I think what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and have 1 or 2 scrims that are not streamed and 1 or 2 scrims that are streamed, which will allow us to hopefully get some tougher opponents, because we could scrim LFL teams or we could scrim LVP teams, but we can't convince them to stream it. And then it also allows us to deal with the problem that we had before, where yes, we will still be streaming most of our stuff. Yes, we still will be sharing stuff, but enemy teams don't have the assurance that everything that we play on stream is the only things that we play, which is what they had this split, which is obviously a big advantage. So yeah, it won't be more full time. Still be 3 days a week maybe, but it will be a bit split, so that hopefully we'll just keep that little bit of doubt there. You know, okay, every time they played this pick, it's gone mid, but it actually could go top because they have also got some scrims that we haven't seen. So I think that was a big upgrade, or difference, I should say. Okay. Is there a big goal for improvement next split? I think it will depend on who we get as the roster. So we just had a meeting about that. Everything's up in the air, unfortunately. Nothing I can confirm or anything like that. So it really depends on who's the roster. I think you should never really go into a split thinking that you have one specific thing to improve. I think what you should do is you should have a structure of how you see the game and how you see performing at the top level in League of Legends. And then you can compare, once you've seen some of the team, where they're ahead of where your expectations are, where they're behind where your expectations are, where their model of the game is different from yours, etc. So for example, Eric's model of the game is much more based on pressure than mine. Mine is much more based on tempo and time. And so finding that kind of balance between the two of us of like, okay, when can we skip the waves to just make this play fast? Or when do we need to actually slow things down to just play on those wave states, etc. Those kind of things, I think, is very useful thing to do. So finding that balance there is important. And you can get fairly specific about like, okay, here's what I think we need to be able to do, but by the time the first game comes. So, you know, coming into the first split of the year, obviously it's a bit different now when we have like 2 weeks before we start and we don't even have our roster. But being in a situation where you're saying, okay, right, by game one, we need to have a clear comm structure of who's leading things so that we can all be on the same page, have clear idea of how we close out the game with X, Y, and Z comps, and a good structure of how we approach the draft and how we think about the patch, for example. But even that, as you can tell, gives you a lot of space to kind of flex it. But I don't believe in coming into a split already saying, right, this is the thing to improve on, because it's impossible to say without knowing the roster. So when we have the roster, when we have our first set of games, after that, I'll probably have a big goal. But for now, I don't. Is losing treats a full reset to the learning? Yes and no. It's obviously a big deal for how we play as a team because we played treats' game, which does mean that if we have a different support, especially one who talks less, I don't think you could have one who talks more, but especially if we had one who talks less, we might end up playing the game in a little bit of a different way and a little bit more like some of the other players. So as well, for example, Santorin, it's much harder to run the game as a jungler when there's lane swaps, because that's much the most important person's tempo in a normal game is almost always the jungler, because it's where that gives you the outnumbered situation. That gives, you know, if your jungler is investing time in bot, then that gives you the advantage on bot side. Not necessarily always the case, but, you know, in theory. But in a lane swap, it's much more about where you're getting push in those side lanes early on, so that you push and move and all those kind of things. So now that there's no lane swaps, and if we have a different support, it could be that Santorin is able to take a bit more of a commanding position in the team, which I think could be really good. He's, of course, played the game at the absolute top level for a huge amount of time. So those kind of things, I think losing treats is a reset to the learning of how the team is going to play together, because they're going to play quite differently, because no one will see the game like him. But of course, stuff that like Freddie's got so much better throughout the split, all that kind of stuff stays, you know. So it's just the like getting together on the same page as a team. That part is maybe not fully reset, but that part does take a big chunk backwards. And it's the other stuff that will stay. So, you know, how we played side lanes, for example, we didn't get all that much better at that, but that won't get worse, I think, with a new support player. But how we play as a team, how we open the map, all those kind of things, we'll have to kind of start same again. Is it hard to find players? I don't do the finding players, actually. I have in previous teams, but not in this team. It's hard because, of course, we don't have budget to pay people. But it's not hard because NLC is a very hyped up league. We have some unbelievably good players. We also have Freddie, which is an appealing thing for a lot of players who want to do some of this streaming stuff. And being in the same league as like Lost Retones and things like that is also very useful. So it's not as easy as finding players for like the LFL, for example, but it's not a case of here's the only players we can find. It's more a case of choosing the players of the many that would want to come. So I don't think it's a particular struggle to find players. We want to find players of a certain level. Ideally, we want to make another team that's kind of not really an ERL team. So yeah, that's it's not too difficult, I think, to find players. Last question for me is, how are you enjoying this experiment so far? I enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed the streaming part a lot. There's a lot of challenges. I loved working with these players. The roster was a really fun roster to work with. So that part of it's great. It's still not maybe exactly what I want to do in esports, head coach, but it was a lot of fun. So there was of course downsides and there was lots of things to learn, but I had a lot of fun. Is no way too slow on the riff sometimes? I don't really know what you mean. As in how active he is in terms of how much he gets out on the map. He isn't a particularly like active mid laner. He's much more like a slow scaling mid laner in that sense, if that's what you mean. The better players in the world are faster at the moment, but that doesn't mean that he's too slow. It's kind of a strange question to answer in a way, because if you mean how he plays in terms of, right, he is most comfortable on stuff like Xerath, on stuff like even Vel'Koz, where he can slowly build up a lead and play into like mid and late game, then that's how he is. That's how his play style is. In which case, two, like, that's not either good or bad, you know, like it's different. For example, do you say like, is Niski too fast in mid lane because he's really active and runs around the map and often under prioritizes his own resources? So it kind of depends. In terms of his reaction time or anything like that, no, he's not too slow. He's an incredibly good player. Yeah, I think he showed that in the final and over the finals weekend. Like, he was a fantastic performer for us. He played really, really well, and really desperately tried to carry that last game against Los Fratones. Joining the fight at Dragon on Ash just looks like for me. So yeah, if you mean slow about moving around the map, then yeah, slow is maybe not the way that I would describe it, but I think I know what you mean. Like, he prioritizes safety more than a lot of players at the kind of top level. But like I say, that's much more like style. So in the same way that I wouldn't say Niski is too fast in mid or Caps is too fast in mid during the lane phase, even though they might move a bit more than like Chovy moves or a bit less than Faker moves, as an example. There are, of course, he has made mistakes of not joining stuff, but to be honest, actually, I think in general, on average, it was more the other way. There were more times where he was like teleporting when he should have just played for himself, or joining a fight when it was better for him to just nuke the next two waves, those kind of things. I think on average, he was under prioritizing himself and helping the team more. But I know what you mean, and it's that kind of style. Like, Nemesis is quite the same in a way, right? Like, he plays quite a passive lane, and sometimes it can seem a bit slow, especially in certain games. There's games where he's a little bit kind of invisible until those late game fights that he then can carry. So it's a bit of a kind of play style question for me, and not necessarily like a good or a bad thing. But he is a kind of weak side mid laner, if that makes sense. So it's more like, okay, he just takes resources from the enemy. They spend a lot of time camping mid, and he's still going to be useful in the like mid and late stages of the game. Okay. Any other questions? I think what I'm going to do tomorrow, I might not do a stream. I might review some of the games with from First Stand, but I'm not sure. I've been kind of watching them live-ish myself, so there's that. I'm also releasing a vlog that I made over the finals weekend. I wanted to release it last week, but I was completely destroyed by this illness, so I wasn't really able to sit up for very long, let alone long enough to edit a vlog last week. So you'll be able to see a little bit about how the event was from my side. And then on Friday, we'll do the coach support show with Watson. And I might go through actually a reflection exercise. But what I might do is I'm going to do a private one, and then I'm going to copy it and do a public one that I can kind of change. And then I'll go through it with with you guys on stream. Maybe that could be quite fun. If I can find a way to show my screen as we do it. Not entirely sure how I'll do that, but we'll work it out. So apart from the support, everyone will stay on the team. Nothing set, Solix. So we were just having a meeting about that now. Nothing set, including myself. Everyone is... there's conversations going on, and every day it's a bit different. So we're exploring a few things, some of which are incredibly exciting, some of which are a little bit more kind of standard, and there's still possibility of it all falling apart at the last second, because there always is. And that's the case of these teams, that we're always going to be lower on people's priority list than an offer from the LFL or something like that. So I can't really say. And same Iceman. I don't know who is remaining on the team for next season. No one is 100% confirmed remaining on the team, as far as I'm aware. But hopefully we'll have 4 the same. That's still the goal, I think it's fair to say. And we get a different support player, and then we kind of run it back with the guys that we have. But everyone's just got to decide, how do they make it work for themselves, in the fact that no one's being paid. And then secondly, is it something that they want to do to take them to where they want to get to, whether that's a content creator or back into the professional scene, or whatever it might be. It's just about thinking those things through. So we might have 3 the same, we might have 2 the same, we might have 4 the same. I think those are the current things. Technically, I think there's a chance we might have just 1 the same, and it's all a completely different project, but that's the sort of 5th option. And this is what happens in off-season, is that every day everything's changing. Every day things are very, very different. So can't really tell you because I don't know myself. So in a week, I'll know a lot more. In 2 weeks, we would hopefully want to be starting to practice. So who knows? The team is very good, but the harmony is not. What do you mean by that? For me, this was the nicest, most harmonious team that I've ever worked with by a long way. So I don't know what you're comparing it to or what you're expecting. But for me, as a competitive team, this was literally the nicest, most harmonious team that I've ever worked with. And I've been doing this since 2013. So that was a bit of a shock. Do you think Fearless Draft is a new future for every tournament? I loved it. Absolutely. I don't understand why people are whining about the fact that Fearless Draft is here to stay. It's the best decision ever. I'm so pro it. I don't think there's any downside to Fearless Draft. It adds way more to the draft. It makes the draft way more complicated. It means you need to understand the game way more than you currently do. It's much more diverse. It's much better for practice. And I don't think I've ever seen anyone have any serious complaint around it. All the complaints that I see are just kind of bullshit to me. They're like, oh, we want to see the best players play the best champions. It's well, that's sure, but yeah, that's not a performance reason, is what I mean. Yeah, it's confirmed. Fearless is staying for the next tournament as well, as far as I'm aware. So the next kind of cycle, and it'll probably be the next one after that. Except if you're in the LFL, because I think the LFL, as far as what Kalen was telling me, is going back to a league format, like a boring, just weeks of best of ones, which means that it could technically be Fearless, but if they're best of ones, it's no different. So everyone else, I mean, they were really messed up this off season. I mean, not off season, this split, because they were the only region playing 2 weeks behind. So there was just no one they could scrim either. But yeah, I think Fearless is staying for the next split, and I think it will stay for the future. So I also really like this CFO thing where they have 6 players. I think that kind of thing is even better for Fearless, which is great. So fun to not watch it be the same meta shit every time. Yeah, exactly. And it was it was so I think there's more to come from Fearless as well. That's the thing. I think we haven't seen the best of Fearless for sure. I think, as I've mentioned, there's real scope for throwing one game in a Fearless best of 5 to get rid of a bunch of champions from the enemy. And these kind of things, just more avenues to show your skill, especially as a coach, is just always something I'm going to be pro. Well, playoff will be for them, I guess, like LTA was. Sorry, was that about the LFL? So they will have playoffs, but as far as I know, they're going back to the old format of like a really long league. So it'll be whatever it is, 8 weeks of just 2 BO1s a week, and then it will be some playoffs at the end. And of course, the playoffs at the end will be fearless if everyone else is fearless, because EMEA will be. And then you need some like uniformity. But other than that, I'm not sure. And I think, it's not like in Fearless you went really crazy. Like, it's still similar. Like, the first games are still always kind of similar. There's going to be like a Callista game, a Skarna Ivan game. There's going to be your Varus game or your Jace game. There'll be your Rumble game. Like, there's still a bunch of comps that you see come up and up, but there's just more of them. And I think that's just good for everyone. What I like most about it is the play needs to be practiced on a broader range of champs, which opens a chance for more creative builds and picks. Exactly. And also, we're starting to see that players don't need 200 games to be good at a champion. They just didn't want to look silly, and now they kind of have to. They have to play that champ once you get into game like 4 and 5. And you see actually that they can play all this weird stuff. I do think it actually makes stuff like ARAM practice and all that kind of thing better, and just playing loads of different champions. Hopefully you can keep Arena in the game and then use that to bring up your mechanics, your fighting mechanics on certain champs. That could be quite good. But yeah, I just think it's so fun, and it makes practice way more fun, especially for us. Like, we had a couple of days where we played non-fearless, and it just gets so boring so quickly. Like, literally, we had a day where we did two non-fearless, then a fearless best of 3. So the first 3 games, all the champions are open. And I think Matt maybe played the same champion 3 times, and we were just like, oh my God. Remember this? Remember when you played like 5 games of the same champion? That was your work day. Like, I just played 5 games of like Cassante top, for example, and it's just... Or I played Cassante and they played Jax, and then the next game I played Jax and they played Cassante, and then the next game I played Cassante again. It just flips back and forward every time, and all these things are just soul destroying. And I don't think it makes you learn more about the game, to be quite honest. I think it's just a bit of a crutch. But those champions are strong, so you either, like, we used to ban them ourselves just to see new things. Whereas now Fearless kind of does that for you. And it also allows you to be a lot more creative in the pick ban. So when you get into game 3 and game 4, it's more thinking, okay, what is the comp that I'm running? And what do I want to ban for that? Rather than just like, well, I need to use all my bans on power stuff because it's always up. Many times watching the matches, I felt that they reacted late. Chachi was often treated as neutral. Of course, it's just my opinion. It's just the sound changed. I don't know what you mean by treated as neutral. Wait, let me just check the other stuff if it makes sense. Are you talking about the harmony of the team? Yeah, I mean, Chachi was very sick. Like I said, if I told him on last week, if it was the same for him as it was for me last week, he played unbelievably well, considering like I could not sit up. Like, I wouldn't have been able to sit up for that many hours last week. And Chachi was just still playing, and especially against Bulldog, he still played really, really well. So yeah. Yeah, watching competitive games where the casters not the thing is like, you can predict most drafts even now, right? And you look at someone like Casual, for example, he can do that. Or like, when we're watching the draft with like Eric or whoever, like we can predict the draft. But that's because knowing about the game and knowing what's needed and saying like, I think they need this here. The thing that's annoying is when like casters who are just repeating the same picks that everyone does. When you get to the level where anyone watching just knows what's coming next, that for me is a little bit annoying in terms of the fearless stuff. No Way said in a stream, I watched 9 out of 10 Scrim games are useless, but I don't understand why. Is the mental like playing ranked, or what's the problem? No, it's we had a conversation about it because he was saying he wasn't sure of scrims, and I told him I think 80% of scrim games are wasted. 80% is maybe high, 90% is definitely high, of course, and it depends what you mean by wasted, but they're not particularly efficient. You can go through a whole day of scrims and not really learn much. It kind of feels like you're going through the motions, but you don't really have big takeaways that actually can make any kind of actual difference to the way that the team plays. It's just not a particularly efficient way to practice a game, but it's the best that we've got. So it's not because people just like run it down or anything, although that does happen. It's very difficult to have a full set of 5 games that are really productive environment and, really efficient learning. And to be honest, actually, from what I've seen, the higher up you go, the worse that is. LEC scrims are further away from LEC stage games than Div 2 games are to Div 2 stage games. Because when you have played as many scrim games as Centauran has, it's like, you just know, because there's no repercussions, and in a sense, in that way, ranked is actually better because there's at least LP, even though most people don't really care about that much if they're a pro player, but there is still something to play for. And the thing is that because it's a snowbally game, if one team gets ahead, they can just quickly like run over the whole game. So it can be inefficient and the best we've got. That's true. So I guess that's one way to think about it. It could be worse, I guess, is one way to think about scrims. Just here says hello. As a LR fan, I was in Nottingham for the final. Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, I know obviously at the moment there's this thing of toxicity in the LR fan base or anything like that, but I said this on a recent YouTube video and I want to say again, like the Lost Retones fan base has been by far the most positive fan base I've ever interacted with, like a big fan base. There are teams, maybe NORD fans are nicer, but there's not exactly a NORD fan base. There's a Freddy fan base and they're all nice because he's nice. Whereas Lost Retones are actually like a big team with a fan base, and I think all the reactions from you guys have been really good, and the way everyone was at like finals and I think it's been really good. I mean, it's a credit to Cadril and the rest of the guys, of course, as well as you guys. But yeah, it's been really fun to be competitors, and hopefully we'll give you a tougher challenge next split. Who did you enjoy working with the most in the team? I liked all of them for different reasons. I think I really liked working with Treats. That's the one I worked with the most over the split. So that's probably a reason why I'm biased towards that. I thought it was just really fun to be working with, and I think he is incredibly good as well, and also has a very interesting way of approaching the game, which I think is very, very good. Matt is fantastic to work with. He's like ultimate professional. Like anything that I would mention to the team, he'd be always the first one to like do it to a really high standard, all those kind of things. Freddie is just like, he just makes any environment better. He just makes everyone have a bit more fun, everyone be a bit more friendly, everyone be a bit more like open. So that's fantastic. Lucas is just like, he was just too good for this, and he still is. Like he's just so good, and so that's always a fun thing to just be able to witness. Like he's just a very, very good player. And Chachi I've been a fan of for such a long time, so that was fantastic to work with him. So I loved working with all of them, to be honest. That's a reason for each of them as well. Okay, I might do like 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll leave it there. We'll kind of do like roughly an hour. So if you have a last couple of questions, do pop them in the chat now. I can talk about, well, so we're not talked about, kind of covered everything, right? We talked about finals, talked a little bit about the split, talked a little bit about the future, but unfortunately I can't give you anything better on that. I don't know the format, for example, for next year in the NLC. I can talk a little bit about EMEA Masters, but let me look at that actually, because there's groups now, right? I saw Los Ratones are in KCB's group. That's not unwinnable, by the way. So they play Nightbirds, which I think they would probably be favourites in. So number one, like Czech Baltic team. Actually, don't know any of those players from the Nightbirds roster, so I can't really tell you if they're favourites or not. I would guess Los Ratones are favourites, and then it's going to be the Prime League team versus KCB, right? Yeah, Prime League, which you'd think would be KCB favoured. But I do think actually Los Ratones genuinely have a chance of beating KCB as well. KCB have two different players from before. They have Isma and they have a different support for now. Who is their support actually? I've forgotten. Because they have a support for just the EMEA Masters, because their support had to go back and get so Yikono is going to join for after EMEA Masters. Bash, is it? Don't know. They're going to have not quite the same roster, but even if they had the same roster, like they're beatable. They're good, but they're beatable. Like I said, the thing for me about LFL is that EC Japan are also like insanely good, and Solari are also very good, and Galleons are also very good. And so that's the big one. Then it's what Heretics are in the same group as Matchco and Zenit and stuff like that. Okay, so I think my teams who go through top of each group, top of each like section for EMEA Masters are, I mean, probably Supermassive. I do think GK can be good, but of course I think they're worse having not got Edward. So they Barca might actually win that game even. So I would say, let's say Supermassive from Group A, EC Japan from Group B. I think they're better than Big, personally. Might not be. I mean, Big have got a very good lineup as well, obviously. But I think so. Then it's Heretics from Group C. And I'm going to be a wild card and say it's Los Ratones from Group D. I think they 3-1 KCB in the qualification match. Oh, it's best of 3. Okay, 2-1 then. Sure. Love how much joy and fun it brought to all of you. It's been nice to follow the journey from the idea of Team NORD. Hey, thanks for watching. Yeah, it's been good to do it and to get back to it, and I hope we can do the same but better for next split. But we'll see. I'm from Germany. Who's playing EMEA for German? Didn't watch Prime League a single time. I didn't watch much Prime League either, to be honest. It's Big who won, which is Shelfmade, Densi, Leb. They run Densi mostly, no? In jungle. Then it's Dale, Bean, and Limit. It's not bad. Mid part. And then the other team from Germany is one of the Einsfahrt, EY, and Fach. Don't even know how to say that. But the roster is Rocklo, Afroboy, Relative. I don't know these players very well either. So, yeah, I mean, EMEA Masters is going to be fun. We'll see. I think KCB win their first game. I think Los Ratones win their first game. That match between the two, that's going to be so hype. I think KCB are favoured, but it isn't super one-sided. It's like 55-45 or something like that. And then, like I say, I think EC Japan can actually beat Big in that one. And I think Heretics have looked pretty good. as always. So I think Heretics beat, yeah, they definitely beat Matchco, didn't they? And Supermassive, I mean, this whole Group A is very stacked, by the way. I don't think Z10 are bad at all. Also, like you've got top Arabian team, top Ultraliga team, second place Spain, and first place Turkey. That is quite hyped. Bel's going to smash them. Maybe. Mainter is really good. He's the, again, LFL MVP, I think, or was it just finals MVP? But he is an insanely good player. He's going to be in the LEC in no time. So it'll be a big test, I think, for Baus. And also no lane swaps, I think, definitely hurts. Definitely hurts Lost Retones, although to be fair, Mainter's also just like it's really insane on tanks and stuff like that. So let me look at what he's actually played in the past. And it's the Rumble, as always. It makes things a bit annoying. Casante, Sion, Gragas, Ambessa, Nara, Nectar, and Jax. But yeah, he's just very good. He's very, very good. Cool. Okay. Well, that is going to be it for me then. So thanks very much for watching. I will be back tomorrow with... Actually, sorry, I won't be back tomorrow. But on Friday, we'll be here with the Coach Support Show, where we're going to do a deep dive into... like a reflective thing of the split and go into a bit more detail there. I'm hopefully going to find a way to actually share it with you. But I have a same exercise that I do always, and I'm just going to do a version that they that can be public. LR, KCB, and EC Japan. Yeah, I wouldn't sleep on Heretics, that's for sure. And I do think Supermassive can do work too. Armut, Skeens, Fiesta, Bao, Carry, like that's a very strong roster as well. I do think KC and EC Japan, you would probably say that LR are not exactly favourites in either of those matchups, but I do genuinely believe that they can win. So it's going to be fun though. It's going to be good to see. My guess would be that at this one, LR don't do all that well, but at the next one they could do much better, because I think you do need to get used to having much stronger competition in competitive games. And that's the great advantage of being in the LFL, is that week in and week out, you play against teams who are insanely good. And the problem is we couldn't even give LR a good game. I mean, we gave them okay games, I guess. But it's not like they had that like over and over and over again. Whereas you've got to be on your game to beat like Gentlemates or whatever in the LFL. So I think that's a big advantage coming into this first tournament, where it's just like best of threes, really quick. You play, and you're out. Whereas next tournament, where there's a bit more space for the second time, that's where if I was going to bet on Lost Retones winning sometime, the middle one would be the biggest, the best one for me. But they can definitely do it for sure. But I think there's Supermassive, KCB, EC Japan, Heretics, Lost Retones, then some wildcard ones like, I mean, Big still can. Matchco, I don't think can. GK, I don't think can. Yeah, those would be the ones for me. So those like 3 or 4. But yeah, it'll be great to see. So thanks very much for watching, and thanks for following us throughout the split. And I will see you guys on Friday.